Did you know the Democratic fight over immigration is not just about policy, but about the future of the party itself? At the DNC summer meeting, one question cut through every speech, every hallway conversation, and every private warning. Should Democrats demand that ICE be abolished, or should they argue it needs to be reformed? As opposition to Trump's immigration crackdown grows, the debate has become a test of how far the party is willing to go to confront enforcement that many activists see as cruel, and how cautious it wants to remain in front of voters who are watching the border debate with alarm. The backdrop is harsh. Trump's immigration strategy is built on visible force, constant arrests, expanded detention, and a promise of control that supporters say restores order. His team has pushed ICE as the front line of that message, turning raids, removals, and detention into proof that the administration is serious. But the cost of that strategy has sharpened the political fight. Fatal incidents tied to ICE operations have fueled outrage, with critics pointing to deaths during detention, enforcement actions gone wrong, and families left in shock after a system meant to manage borders instead leaves behind tragedy. Every new incident becomes more than a case file. It becomes a symbol of what is broken. And that is where the Democratic split becomes so visible. On one side are progressives who argue that ICE is not a broken agency, but a fundamentally harmful one. They say reform is too weak, too slow, and too easy for future presidents to undo. Their message is simple and emotionally powerful. If the agency can still produce fear, separation, and deadly outcomes, then it should not be preserved in its current form. On the other side are moderates who warn that abolish the agency is the kind of slogan that can be weaponized against Democrats in swing districts. They want to talk about accountability, oversight, and humane enforcement without sounding like they are ignoring border security altogether. Sarah put it this way: the party is being pulled between moral clarity and electoral caution. For progressives, the politics of immigration have shifted because Trump has made enforcement the centerpiece of his agenda. And that has forced Democrats to decide whether they will answer with a full-scale challenge or a softer, safer alternative. Reform, they argue, can sound like surrender. Abolition, by contrast, signals a break from a system that many activists believe has been normalized for too long. But moderates counter that voters who are worried about chaos at the border may hear abolition as proof that Democrats are out of step with basic public safety concerns. In their view, the party cannot win a national argument if it sounds like it wants to tear down every enforcement tool at once. Ashley's reaction captured the emotional core of that divide. For many families and immigrant advocates, the debate is not abstract at all. It is about fear, memory, and the daily reality of living under enforcement that can come suddenly and violently. When people talk about ICE, they are not only talking about immigration policy, they are talking about raids in workplaces, officers at doors before sunrise, and loved ones who vanish into detention systems that can feel impossible to navigate. That is why fatal incidents hit so hard. They turn a political argument into a human one. Supporters of abolition say those deaths prove the agency's design is the problem. Critics say those tragedies demand tighter rules, stronger oversight, and better training, not total elimination. Nia offered the symbolic conscience of the moment. To activists inside and outside the meeting, ICE has become more than an agency. It is a symbol of who gets protected, who gets targeted, and how power is exercised at the border and far beyond it. That symbol matters because Trump understands it. His immigration crackdown is not only about policy results, it is about sending a message that enforcement will be seen, felt, and feared. The louder the crackdown becomes, the more Democrats are forced to define themselves against it. And the more they define themselves against it, the more divided they become over whether the right answer is to repair the system or reject it outright. That tension is shaping the broader supporter versus critic framing inside the party. Supporters of a reform message say Democrats need a winning coalition, not just a passionate one. They argue that midterm races will be decided by suburban voters, independents, and working-class families who may support immigration reform but still want order at the border. In that lane, the safest message is one that condemns abuses, demands oversight, and promises a fair system without embracing language that Republicans can caricature as reckless. Critics of that approach say caution has a price. They warn that if Democrats keep softening their language to avoid attacks, They will lose the energy of younger voters, Latino organizers, and progressive activists who want the party to stand for something clear and uncompromising. The midterm implications are enormous. Immigration has a way of traveling fast through the political bloodstream, and when enforcement stories dominate the news, they can reshape the entire national conversation. Republicans want Democrats to look divided, hesitant, and overly sympathetic to open-ended protest. Democrats want to turn the issue back onto Trump by highlighting cruelty, fatal outcomes, and the human cost of his crackdown. But if the party cannot settle on one message, it risks sending mixed signals to voters who are already saturated with fear, anger, and confusion. That makes the next few months critical because every statement from Democratic leaders will be measured not just for policy substance, but for whether it sounds like a governing answer or an activist chant. What to watch next is whether the party tries to bridge the gap with a new hybrid message. Will leaders push for aggressive ICE reform, tighter accountability, and humanitarian limits while avoiding the word abolition altogether? Or will the progressive wing force the debate further, insisting that moral credibility requires a stronger break? Watch for how candidates in competitive districts speak about enforcement, because their language will reveal where the party thinks the center of gravity really is. Watch also for how Trump and his allies respond, because they will use every internal Democratic disagreement to argue that the opposition cannot be trusted with border security. And watch the coverage of any new ICE incident, because one more fatal case could shift the entire tone of the debate overnight. At the end of the day, this is a watchdog warning for both parties. Trump's crackdown may energize his base, but it also keeps reopening the wounds that make immigration such a volatile issue. Democrats may believe they are fighting for humanity, but if they cannot agree on what comes after outrage, they may turn a powerful critique into a political liability. The fight over ICE is no longer just about what the agency does. It is about what America is willing to tolerate, what Democrats are willing to defend, and which message will still make sense when voters head to the polls.